Hi. So you may have gathered that Sharon and I have got very different areas of expertise. Sharon's absolutely amazing businesswoman, um, and is so knowledgeable on the whole process of setting up a business, marketing, so on and so forth. Whereas as much as I've got some of that expertise, it's developing. But my strengths lie more, and my interests lie more in the whole area of well-being, mental health, breaking the stigmas to do with mental health, but also coaching and supporting others, and finding ways to help people to figure out what it is that their path is. So my intention this afternoon was to just do hopefully a relatively short video with just some snippets, some thoughts about my initial 12 months in terms of recovery from leaving the classroom, because it has been a process of recovery. Um, and in conversation with Sharon only a few days ago, we were reflecting on the fact that actually I've achieved a lot in 12 months, and I've come a long way in 12 months, and I'd not actually recognised that in myself, and that's quite an achievement. So I'm going to section this video, hopefully, and break it into little parts, so it should make it easier to jump ahead if you wish to. But I hope you'll watch the whole video. So recovery position for me initially involved me being on the sofa a lot, watching a lot of box sets on Netflix, eating a lot of crisps and chocolate, and generally dossing about and not doing very much. It was kind of like the start of the summer holiday, that kind of, oh my God, it's all stopped. I'm just going to collapse for a bit. That collapse phase kind of intermittently lasted for about 5 or 6 weeks, probably really until the point where the only time that I did go back into my school, where I went in and collected all of my stuff um, from school and walked away, and metaphorically, no, in fact, it wasn't metaphorically, I actually did it, stuck two fingers up at the building. Prior to me walking out of school, um, I'd already started applying for other teaching roles, um, because I was very much in a mindset of, I'm a teacher, I'm a senior leader, that's my skill set, that's all I know, that's all I can do. And so I had been applying for some jobs, because as much as I didn't believe that I was imminently going to be rejected from the profession, um, I sensed that my school was on a pathway into territory that I wouldn't be able to work in. So I knew that at some point I was going to have to go. So I'd applied for a couple of jobs, doing what I knew, because that's what you do when you're a teacher, particularly if you've gone in, um, you know, straight from school to sixth form to uni, and straight back in. You've never really known anything else, and you don't have any belief that you can do anything else. And you're not encouraged as a teacher, I don't think anyway, to reflect on your skill sets and actually really look at what it is that you do day in, day out, and actually how valuable those skills are. So I applied for a couple of jobs. I got an interview, um, weirdly, the week after I'd walked out of school. So I actually had to ask for permission to go and attend that interview, because I was signed off sick. And I I went to that interview and my heart wasn't in it. And also, halfway through the afternoon, in a brief break, I made the mistake of checking my emails and found an email from the person who had basically caused me to walk out, and that sent me into a flat spin. So, in reality, that whole process, I was doomed to failure on that. So I came away from that interview kind of with mixed feelings. I was angry that I'd allowed myself to be wobbled by an email. I was frustrated that I didn't get through the second day, but also there was a bit of a sense of relief in that I don't think I knew that my heart really was not in it at all. Um, so I drove home from that interview and decided that was that. I wasn't going to be trawling the test. I wasn't going to be sending my CVs and writing letters and investing hours of time in doing that. And a few days after that, I bounced myself into my car and drove down to my brother's. And this was one of the points where I started having conversations about what my skill set really is. Um, and that made me think about the move from teaching to the corporate world. Trying to jump from teaching into the corporate world into jobs that are on an equivalent salary to what you might have been on in teaching. Certainly, once you get to middle leadership or senior leadership roles in teaching, that jump is very, very difficult, because as much as you've got strong skill sets that are transferable, you haven't got experience in the private sector, in the corporate world, and those environments are very different to schools. So this is one of the things that over the next few weeks we're going to be looking at, how we can support people in restructuring CVs, in writing letters, in translating those transferable skills and your experience in the classroom and in the school environment into something that corporate employers see value in. I spent a lot of time with my brother, because my brother's been in corporate and voluntary sector for 20 odd years. So we spent a huge amount of time really going through what my job had consisted of for the last 15 to 20 years, and looking at those skills and really looking at it in a really detailed way, microscopic, down to, what can you do on a spreadsheet? What are your levels of skills with PowerPoint? Have you been coaching and line managing people? It was all those sorts of things. And I actually built a document whereby I listed everything that I've ever done, and then we translated that into corporate speak, and so that I was able to start looking through job descriptions and person specs and matching up my experience to what corporate employers were looking for. And I did find 3 or 4 jobs that I was actually interested in at that point, and I wrote letters for them and sent off my letter and my restructured CV, but was hitting brick walls all over the place. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, I realise now that I was aiming far too high, in that I was aiming for jobs that were equivalent salary. And actually, because I'd not been in the corporate world, I was going to need to drop my expectations. And at that point, I didn't feel that I was in a position to do that. So that led me on a different path. one of the things that I discussed initially with family and friends was finding the things that made me happy, that brought me joy, and figuring out a way to do those things as my source of income. Um, and in a conversation with my brother again, who is very forthright, he tells it as it is, very supportive. Um, he talked to me about the idea of taking my photography, which I'd done as a sideline. It had earned me a little bit of money over the years, but as I've said previously, I ran out of time to be able to sort of nurture that side of me. Um, so yeah, so we talked about the idea of setting up the photography business, and as I very much do, I threw all of the reasons why not at my brother, and my brother reframed those and sent them all straight back to me with a, well, why not? What's the worst that could happen? You're in a position at the moment where you're not earning anything. You've got a few months' grace in terms of savings and bits and bobs. So why not try it? Because the very worst that happens is that nothing comes of it, but you've not lost anything. And I was lucky because I'd been sort of semi-pro with my photography, that I had all of my gear anyway. You know, I spent money on cameras and lights and all sorts of things over the past 10 years or so. So essentially I was ready to set up as a flexible home studio or to visit people. And I was already skilled in shooting weddings, having done a number of them. So I got to the point of, well, yeah, okay, why not? Um, and so it began. The word hustle has come into my daily language, in that um, in order to keep your head above water, if you don't go into full time, similar level employment, um, there is a need to do stuff in order to pay the bills, and that's the reality. Um, it was Sharon in a conversation with her when I first met her late last year, who talked to me about the idea of doing stuff, do what you need to do to get the money in, you know, cut back on things, um, stop spending on things that you don't need, stop the takeaways, um, stop buying coffee at Starbucks every day, you know, and all sorts of little things about reining back in the spending, but also finding different income streams. Um, so this idea of kind of little side hustles is fundamental to how I've survived for the last 12 months, and pretty much how I'm going to survive for the next 12 months, I would think. Because my plan is that 12 months time from now, I will have um, multiple income streams from different business elements that I've got running. But they're going to take time to establish and bed in, and I'm realistic about that. So in January this year, I started tutoring again, and that was a big step for me because I swore blind that I would never ever go back to teaching in any way, shape, or form, because I felt very much that I'd been rejected from teaching. And in reality, over time, and seeing some of the things that were going on around me, I actually began to realise that was the one thing that I really missed about teaching, was working with the kids. Because I think if you are a teacher, and especially if you've done it for a long time, it just becomes part of who you are, and you can't help yourself. I mean, even going to the supermarket sometimes, if I see a group of kids, the teacher in me goes on to high alert. So I think I needed that. So I slipped into tuition in January and very quickly got to a point where I was in demand for one-to-one tuition through schools for hard to reach children, and children who were school refusing or home educated for a variety of reasons. And that was paying my bills without a shadow of a doubt. And then unfortunately lockdown came and that stopped. So lockdown's caused probably a lot more reflection on some of the things I've done on the process of setting up my photography business formally, on some of the things that I've tried with the photography business. So, for example, going to Christmas fairs and wedding fairs and looking at those processes and whether they've actually had a return on the investment, and making decisions about how I go forwards in the future with those. But lockdown has also shown me that, from my point of view, the photography is not going to be something that picks up for me in the next 12 months, because the uncertainty, particularly around weddings and gigs and concerts and live performances, which are my two areas of specialism, really. Those things are not going to pick up in their truest sense. There's so much uncertainty that people are not booking. They're not, they're not committing to dates for weddings and so on and so forth. So that is a very uncertain income stream for me. And so I'm seriously having to think about, well, okay, how do I capitalize on my other skills? And so my attention is being diverted to my tutoring business and also to my coaching business, in terms of making those businesses work for me at the moment, and kind of surrendering the photography in order to focus on those two areas that are potentially going to bring me enough income, and accepting that at this point in time the photography is going to be what it's going to be. If people book, they book. If they don't, they don't. But I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time and energy on it. And being brave enough to do that is a challenge, because you've got to have some trust and some faith that the other things that you're doing are valid and that they work and that there is a market for them. And it is, so much of this last 12 months has been about big leaps of faith with eyes shut and not quite knowing what sort of ground that I'm going to land on, but that's okay. So yeah, so the whole sort of idea of hustling and figuring out what it is that you can do. Where can you make some money here? Where can you make some money there? Can you do a day's supply? Can you go and get a job in the local corner shop and work for 16 hours a week doing that to bring in some regular income? It's about compromise and doing what you need to do, but knowing that there is a long game, and that in time it will be where you need it to be. It may be year 2, it may be year 3, but at some point it's going to right itself. And so there needs to be a degree of faith in what you're doing. So as a teacher, you walk into the system as a fresh-faced NQT, and pretty much from that day forward, your professional development is largely driven by the needs of the school and what your line manager tells you you need to do. So you need to go on this course, or I need you to attend this seminar or this webinar, or we've got this staff CPD. But essentially, you're not in control of the things that you learn and the things that you want to develop for yourself. Sometimes people have time to take on things outside of the classroom, to do online study, to do open university courses, and so on and so forth. And I found probably in my first 10 years of teaching that I did do those things. I did a course in neuro-linguistic programming, so I've got a qualification in that. And I did the NPQH 3 choice early on, well, not early on, about 10 years in to my teaching career. But broadly speaking, most of my broader skill sets have come about from me doing things in my own time and figuring them out. My degrees in business and economics and ICT. I've also got a postgrad qualification in special needs coordination. So I've got a range of qualifications, but actually, there's lots of things that you need when you're setting up a business that you don't necessarily know about. One of the big things for me is about social media. So most of us are fairly savvy in some way, shape, or form on at least one social media platform, or we think we are. So I thought I was great at using Twitter and Facebook, but actually I realized that my understanding and my experience of those things was very limited, in that it was being used for personal use rather than for business use. And when you get into the realms of using social media for business purposes, to promote your business, to share what it is that you do, and to reach an audience who may benefit from your product or service, that's a very different set of skills that are needed. So one of the things that I did in terms of investing in myself was invested in some training to do with particularly Twitter, because I've found that's been a platform that's worked really effectively for me. And I have spent some of my savings on working with coaches or trainers in particular areas in order to skill me up. And there's an interesting wrangling that has to take place when you do that, because again, as a teacher, as much as you're not in control of your training, the courses that you go on are paid for by your school. So you've never had to, aside from perhaps uni, if you were unfortunate enough to be young enough to have paid fees and had to take out the monstrous student loans. But most of the time, teachers, certainly in my age group, in their 40s and 50s, predominantly have had their training paid for them. So when you start to realise that training is really expensive, there is a real wrangle to be had in terms of figuring out, well, what's the potential benefit? What's the trade-off here? Because if I'm going to spend £1,000 on a fixed amount of time with a trainer, and the time then that I'm going to invest in the follow-up tasks and actually implementing the training, what's the return going to be for me on that? How's it going to help me? Is it worth the money? Not the time and the effort, because the time and the effort, you can't put a value on that, but is it worth the money? And so I've weighed up lots and lots of different options in the last 6 months to do with training and investment in myself, and had two fairly major investments of money. And I say fairly major, £1,000 for two different trainers. which to me feels like a huge amount of money, but actually the benefit that I've got and I'm continuing to get from those two investments in myself have been huge and actually have made a massive difference to me. So you always need to be thinking about return on investment. If you're spending money on training, what's going to be the value of that coming back? If I buy marketing materials for my photography business, how am I going to measure my return on that? If I paid to go and set up at a wedding fair for 2 days and that cost me £100, but I get a wedding in at £1,500, then that wedding fair is paid for itself. The return on investment is significant. So you constantly need to be thinking about the benefits, but not just in terms of what's that going to do for me in terms of sales and money coming in, but actually what's it doing for me in terms of business reputation, my reach, who I'm marketing to, understanding all of those things as well, so that actually the benefits that come out of it are not necessarily immediate financial benefits, and you may need to accept that is the case. Being self-motivated in developing new skills and looking for resources, and Sharon says it all of the time, Google is my friend, YouTube is my friend. There is so much out there to read about, find out about, free courses that you can register on, heavily discounted courses through different recruitment agencies. So sometimes it's worth signing up with recruitment agencies and not uploading your CV, but just actually signing up so that you can access their training libraries. There's a wealth of stuff out there. And if there's something that you're interested in but you don't feel skilled in, or you don't feel that you're qualified to do, then go and have a look at what training's there. Because actually, you might find when you start looking at training in an area that you're particularly interested in, that you already have got some of the skills and that you can do the training for a low cost and refresh and refine and come out of that with a bit more confidence. So be self-motivated with your training. Be self-motivated with your personal development. Nobody else is going to tell you what to do anymore. And that's terrifying, but it's so liberating, because actually now you can do whatever you want to do. So don't hold back. Invest your time, invest the energy, be structured about it or be ad hoc about it. But really do invest in yourself in whatever way you can. So quickly to touch on the idea of being able to pivot. And any Friends fans will now be hearing Ross Geller shouting pivot at the top of his voice. And if you don't know what I'm on about, I'm sorry for the reference. I'm very much a person who, when she decides to do something, she wants it to happen straight away. I'm not known for my patience with myself. I'm very patient with other people. I'm very nurturing, very supportive, will unpick things with others, but I sometimes don't give myself the benefit of that same sort of reflective approach. So when I decided I was going into photography, that became my be all and end all at that point in time, and I was not going to deviate from that path. I wasn't going to have anybody tell me that it wasn't going to work or suggest other things. I was resolutely stubborn about it. And it was only really in January time when I also slipped into tutoring, and consciously then made a decision that was something that I was enjoying and I could do alongside the photography. That I started to realize that diversifying and also if needs be, stopping something to focus on something else is really important, and it's not a sign of failure. So going back to the idea of what I talked about previously, my business, my photography business is now, it's not on hold, it's still there. All of my marketing materials are still there, my website's still there, people can book in for to request information. All my automated systems are still there. So I'm kind of surrendering that at the moment and letting it be what it will be. If people inquire for weddings, then so be it. I will, you know, if I'm available, I'll take those bookings. I'm not abandoning it, but I'm changing my focus, and that's a big shift for me, because again, 12 months ago, if I'd said, oh, actually, I'm going to change my focus away from my photography business, I would have seen that as me failing at setting up my photography business. But it's not. It's just a change of focus. And when you come out of teaching again, you're kind of so entrenched in, I must do this in a particular way because this is what is expected of me. And if I don't do it, somebody's going to be critical of it. So you lose your sense of self-direction and your ability to trust in your own judgment, I think. So I've moved on from that, and I've accepted my photography is going to be there. I'm never getting rid of my cameras, even if I end up just doing my photography for me as passion projects and sidelines. So be it. And if it turns out that by surrendering it, people start booking in organically, great. It will be what it's going to be. And at the moment, I'm focusing very much on setting up my tuition business, getting the marketing right for that, but also on developing the coaching side of what I do. And so at the moment, you sometimes might feel like you're juggling multiple things, but that's okay. It shows flexibility, it shows adaptability, and the biggest thing for me is that I'm learning to be patient with myself and to pace myself and think longer term. So everything is about steps along the way at the moment now, rather than I need to do this and I need to do it now and it needs to be working straight away. And that's a huge mind shift. The final thing that I want to say is that there is no harm in asking. I am somebody who is deeply, deeply risk averse, or used to be. It might be difficult to believe that I'm not overtly confident. I'm somebody who worries far too much about what other people think of me, what other people might say to me if I ask them for support or help or a favour. Um, I'm starting to get over that a little bit. I'm doing a lot of reading. I'm doing a lot of journaling and self-reflection and meditation and all sorts of things to do with my well-being and how I approach the world. But I have learned in the last 7 months. What are we? June, July? No, 7 months. That there is no harm in asking. And the thing that taught me that lesson was a chance meeting via Twitter. I'd sent a shout out, almost like a call for models for a photography project that I was doing, and ended up meeting up with this wonderful couple who are very active with regards to mental health, and very active in the music scene as well. And I met up with them one afternoon, and just in conversation with somebody else who came over, I ended up with a press pass to photograph a band called Shed 7 that evening. Because Dan, who I'd met with, had just asked is there any chance? Sarah's a photographer. Is there any chance she can be on the guest list for tonight? Yeah, no problem. Oh my God, my mind was blown. Because I'd always thought that that was a closed door, and that was one of my on my dream list, is to be in the pit at a gig, because I love going to gigs under normal circumstances. And so that encouraged me over the next month to start figuring out how I could get into more photography pits, and I figured it out and sent out requests with my credentials to different people, and actually had a number of gigs and events lined up for this year. So the week before lockdown, I photographed Brian Ferry in concert in Manchester. I was due to photograph Rick Astley in concert in Liverpool, but unfortunately that was during lockdown, so that's been postponed. Shed 7 again, a band called Apollo Junction from Leeds, and I was due to be the official photographer for a local music festival in June, but unfortunately all that went out of the window. But it's not a problem, those contacts remain, and they'll come back again next year. But had I not witnessed Dan asking and him being responded to in the affirmative, I don't think I'd have ever taken that chance to contact people who would be the decision makers about whether I could get into that place or not. Whereas seeing him do it was like, well, okay, what's the worst that could happen? They could say no. Does that harm me in any way? No, it doesn't. Does it damage me? It doesn't. The worst that could happen is that my pride takes a little bit of a knock. So be it. So I started putting myself out there, and that started to reap dividends, and that will pick up again on the other side of all of this. Other ways that you can ask for help. Ask for testimonials from people that you've worked with. So I'm in the process of doing that at the moment, that I'm getting testimonials from people that I've worked with in the last 24 years, that I have coached, that I've mentored and supported, that I've trained, all sorts of things, because that will feed into the processes that I'm going through in terms of setting up some of my other areas of business, particularly my coaching. So get those testimonials so you can pull quotes from them, and also look at quid pro quo situations. If you want a favour from somebody, ask them, what can you offer them in return? Make it almost an impossible question to respond negatively to. So I really need some help with my social media marketing. In return, I'll write some copy for you for your website. Look at what it is that you can offer in return, even if it's just a bit of time and advice in something that you're skilled in, and use that to start to pull in the experience and the skills that you need to move yourself forward. Okay, I hope that's been helpful. And if you've got any questions, please do drop me a message or leave a message in the comments. And if there's any particular areas that you would like me to talk about in future videos, then please let me know. But one of the things that I'm very much going to be focusing on within the group is the whole idea of sort of personal growth, support, mental health and well-being, and how you deal with the emotional aspects of moving forward after you've exited from teaching, or whilst you're thinking about what you can do if you choose to exit teaching. So please let me know if there's something that you would like me to talk about. Have a lovely rest of the day, and I will speak to you soon.